Hello. Okay, so I got a ton of questions. I'm super excited to answer them. The following day, I tried to make a video where I answered all the questions, and it was like over 20 minutes, and I think that's a little much. So what I'm gonna do is for the next week is like every day I'll answer like 2 questions that are kind of similar and then post them. So and I'm going to kind of try and go in chronological order. So tonight I want to answer questions like early signs for babies and little kids, as well as like the signs that we saw in Ryker that made us want to get him tested. Mind you, I'm not a doctor. I do not know everything. Obviously, I know stuff after research and after Ryker, but anyway, okay, so with babies, it's really hard because kids develop so differently. You can't even get a kid tested for autism until they are 2, which sometimes is even early because, like I said, kids do things at such different ages. Super obvious ones are, avoiding eye contact and things like not answering to their name when you call them. Like, there's a baby or a little kid and you're like, hey, Ryker, like, and they continue playing and don't acknowledge you. That's easy. Some autistic babies are really easy. Ryker was an easy baby. Some autistic kids are high maintenance. It is so hard until they get older, when they kind of set apart a little bit. Some signs in Ryker that I felt were pretty obvious and that like other parents that are asking could kind of go off of. Number one obvious was his stimming, which is, so in a normal brain, all of our senses go at different times. And in autistic brain, all of their senses go to their brain at the same time, so it causes this overload. And kids do this thing, adults, do this thing called stimming, which is like a release of all those senses. Some kids like flap their hands, some do like different body movements. Ryker does this thing where he like curls up like this and like goes like this, and sometimes he squeals during it, sometimes he makes noises, sometimes it's silent. It ranges anywhere from like a second to like 10 seconds. And it's usually when he's excited or waiting, like anticipating something, something like that. It happens all the time. If he's thrown out of his element, it happens way more often than if he's just home in his normal routine. Then it doesn't happen as often. Also, obvious signs, eye contact. He's definitely come a long way with eye contact, but it was hard to get him to look at you for long periods of time. He would do things that were like socially inappropriate, and as far as like relationships, not always appropriate. Like someone would come over to our house and he had never met them before, and he was like hanging on them and like acting like he knew them and like he knew them his whole life or something. So that wasn't, and it's funny because like Asperger's is sometimes, which is like a form of autism, is the exact opposite. So like they're not really social and they have social issues in the opposite direction. Riker's very, very like over friendly and over, like he trusts people really easy, which isn't a normal thing. Things that were like common sense to you and I, like when someone's walking towards you and he would like stand there in the middle of the way, like would not move, just didn't even think of like moving, would just stand there, things like that. Things like when I would ask him something, like say I asked him, how was your day today? He would be like, it was good, and like whisper it like quietly to himself. So if I said something in that time period of when he was copying himself, he wouldn't hear anything I said because he was so focused on what he was saying. So he was not retaining any information. A lot of autistic kids can't follow like multiple directions For example, if I was like, hey Ryker, go take your pants off and put them in the dirty clothes and then turn off your light, he would probably only get take your pants off. As we worked with him and as he got older, then he'd get like the and put him in the dirty clothes, but the last thing with the turn your light off, it's difficult. Things like that. Very, very sensitive. Anything could make him cry. Anything would set him off into an emotional state. Things like that. Hard time sharing, which again, a lot of kids have issues with, but it was like, it was to the extreme. Trying to think of other things. There was like things that kids were catching on in school and he just wasn't catching on. Another super obvious one was his speech. A lot of kids, this is babies and little kids too, either their speech is delayed or they're nonverbal. There's a lot of nonverbal autistic kids. His speech is very behind. It still is very behind. He's in speech now. He has been for 3 years now. So things like that, those are all signs. And I literally, like, when I would just pick up on like abnormal things, I just started making a list of things and then comparing it to like what I found on the internet is pretty much how I went about signs. It's easy for me to spot autistic kids now. So if you have any questions, like if you think something's odd or something, like let me know. I'm sure I forgot a million things. Tomorrow I'll tell the story of when I told Gage that I thought we should get Ryker tested, and then also like what that process is, and I might get into like triggers for Ryker if I have time, but I'm trying to keep them semi-short so you guys are interested. So let me know if you have any more questions after that. Hopefully I answered your questions, and I'm going to answer some personal messages about this topic too. All right, thanks.